Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Combalusier, a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. Today's webinar focuses on Prospector Metals, which is a newly rebranded story that is a Discovery Group company with a business model focused on district-scale, early-stage exploration of gold and base metal prospects with the goal of making discoveries. The company is focused on identifying underexplored or overlooked mineral districts which display important structural or mineralogical similarities with well-endowed mining camps. Today, I have with me on the webinar Alex Heath, who's the president and CEO at Prospector Metals. The format of today's webinar will be comprised of two parts. In the first part, Alex will provide an introduction to Prospector Metals, and then in the second part, we'll take your questions live. So please send in your questions using the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. And I'll note you can submit them at any point throughout the presentation. So before we get started, I'll cover the disclosures. So for Prospector Metals, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Prospector Metals corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Prospector Metals specific disclosures. So with that out of the way, I'll turn it over to Alex to introduce you to the company and what you have to look forward to going forward. So Alex, please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, so I think I'll start off by just reiterating what Taylor just mentioned, is that Prospector, we just went through a rebranding and actually a share consolidation and a financing all in one go. And I'll kind of give you a little bit of background on why that was, why we decided to do that at this time. So Prospector Metals used to be called Ethos Gold, and it has been around for about a dozen years or so, and it's kind of gone through a few different iterations. It was originally started by a gentleman named Gary Freeman, and he unfortunately passed away a few years ago. And then one of the directors, Craig Roberts, took over the company and sort of started putting it back together and putting it on a new trajectory. So you fast forward a little bit to about a year and a half ago or so. Craig, who was running the company, ran into Rob Carpenter, who's now our co-chairman. At the time, he was he'd just retired. Sorry, he'd come out of retirement after the successful selling of Kaminak Gold, and was sort of dabbling back in the business. You know, we'd gone through that downturn since probably 2013 or so. So he was, ready to get back into the business. And so the two of them were chatting because, we're both part of Discovery Group and sort of comparing notes on what they saw as opportunities in the gold sector and other sectors as well in the mineral sector. So I think they both came to a similar conclusion was, at the time, which was, like I said, a year and a half, 2 years ago, a lot of the opportunities that were available were either too expensive, or these are projects that had already had, a number of drill holes on it. You don't want to be the one drilling the 13th drill season on it, 100th hole. A lot of the value that's been created through Discovery Group has been on greenfield exploration, grassroots exploration, and making a big discovery. And I think they both decided that was kind of what they wanted to do, to work together and sort of recreate Ethos as a early stage opportunity to make a big discovery. And so here we are today. We've since put a few more projects into the company, built out the team, and it was a good time now to sort of rebrand the company. So we changed the name of the company from Ethos to Prospector. At the same time, we had about 140 million shares outstanding. We felt it was the right time to do a share consolidation. So did a 3-for-1 consolidation at the same time. And in conjunction with that, a top-up financing of $3 million, which would pay for the exploration programs that we're going to talk about today. So that's kind of the background on Prospector Metals. I'll just skip ahead to the slide. As Taylor mentioned, caveat emptor, forward-looking statements. We will be sort of projecting for what we're going to be doing this year. So again, just to reiterate what our plans are. With Rob Carpenter as co-chairman and a history of discovery with our group, I think the idea here is really to recreate the success that we've had in the past with Kaminak, for example. The way that Kaminak was originally structured looked a little bit like what we look like today. It almost looks like a prospect generator, but that's actually not the case. So we do have about 9 projects in our portfolio, but really the idea here is cost-effective exploration using our very technical team with a lot of experience. And the idea here is to advance each project through grassroots exploration. And as Taylor mentioned, we're looking for district scale opportunities in areas that are either off the beaten track or they just have really good geology. And we're trying to get large portions of land. And again, advancing it through grassroots exploration doesn't cost you a lot of money, around $400,000 to $500,000. And at that point, at the end of your first season of exploration, you then decide whether you continue spending money or you drop the project. And it's really quite mercenary, in fact. So, we aren't trying to vend off properties and clip an NSR. We are actually swinging for the fences, looking for a discovery that will create transformational shareholder value. So that's really the genesis of our company. If incidentally we find something that's interesting to somebody else, but maybe not a home run, we would look to sell it. But that's not really our business model. Our model is truly to make a discovery. We are part of Discovery Group. If you haven't heard of us, we're an alliance of publicly traded companies. There's, I think, 10 companies in the group. It may have changed recently with Great Bear being sold to Kinross, but you can kind of see the history of success there on the right. Great Bear, the most recent, was sold to Kinross for $1.8 billion. And as mentioned, Rob Carpenter, who's our co-chairman, was the founder and former CEO of Kaminak, which sold to Gold Corp for $520 million. What's great about having an alliance of companies like this is that we can pull in highly technical people. We can share costs in terms of marketing, in terms of overhead, and allows us to spread our exploration dollars that much further. And you can see, it's all about batting average really in the exploration game. It just increases our probability of success. In terms of the management team, my background, I used to work for a boutique investment bank in Vancouver. We did a lot of financings for junior exploration companies, including Kaminak. In 2011, I actually did a site visit to Kaminak and to Ethos. They had a property in the Yukon. I also did a lot of work with Craig Roberts. He was a banker at PI Financial at the time. So, all these guys, we've actually come, across each other in the last 11 years or so. A number of times. You can see on our board, we also have serial entrepreneurs, Hank Van Elfen, Michael Murphy as well. Joe Price is our VP of exploration. She's got a wealth of experience in managing exploration programs. On our advisory board, we've got Dr. Rob Brzdowski, PhD geologist, specializes in nickel copper PGE deposits. We've got one in our portfolio. Dr. Alan Wainwright wrote his PhD, I believe it was on Oyu Tolgoi, but basically copper porphyries. And Jody Gibson was the exploration geologist of the year in 2021. He's an advisor for us on our Newfoundland property. And at the bottom, John and Jim, these are the co-founders and principals of Discovery Group. They're involved with all the companies that I just mentioned in some capacity or another. They're either large shareholders, directors, or in our case, they're large shareholders and advisors to us. So this is our portfolio at present. I'd say the way to look at us is that we advance each project to drill stage, and then hopefully we've made a discovery or we've dropped it. The idea here is to keep the pipeline full, and each year when a project drops off, we continue to add to it. Through our affiliation with Discovery Group, we see lots of properties, lots of opportunities, and that's kind of the idea, is that we're not a one-trick pony. We're always going to have a full pipeline of exploration projects to look at. So today I'm going to focus on 3 particular projects and in this order. Too Good, which is our Newfoundland gold property, high-grade gold. It's about to be drilled in May. And then the next one is going to be Witten Lake, nickel copper PGE, very in vogue. We've seen the Canadian government and the US government both pushing really hard for critical metals, including nickel. And in Canada, nickel copper PGE are critical to what the plans are. And the final project that I'll talk about is our Savant Lake high-grade gold project in Ontario. The other projects I won't dwell on too much, just to say that they're in the pipeline and we're going to be advancing those systematically throughout the year. So starting with our Too Good project. This project actually came through our affiliation with Newfound Gold through Craig Roberts. So he's actually the CEO of Newfound Gold as well, and he's the co-chairman of our company. This property came through the same vendors that sold the Queensway Project to Newfound Gold, the Keats brothers. We packaged together 5 different properties as well to come up with a 118 square kilometer land package. That started in 2020, and then last year in 2021, we were able to finally get on the property and do some grassroots exploration and prospecting. Immediately, we found high-grade gold in the similar regions. You can see, and I'll kind of just circle an area for you down here in the central south region of the property. This is where there was historical samples of visible gold. We followed that up and we found 3 areas of high-grade gold, including 7,800 grams per ton. So really, bonanza grades. But really the idea here was try to follow up and find the source of the material. And what we found, we did a site visit in the summer and we spoke to the Geological Survey of Newfoundland, and they told us that this particular region of Newfoundland 12,000 years ago was underwater. So there is no overburden. What you see on surface is coming from in close proximity to the source. This isn't coming from, glaciers coming down from, hundreds of miles away and depositing boulders on surface. This is, the 7,800 gram per ton sample. I know it's pretty small. I'm just going to clear this off so you can see is over here. And we traced it back to this vein system, which is only a few meters away from that original discovery. So this is our first showing. It's called the Titan showing. We've trenched it. We've got high-grade samples on surface. This will be the first area that we'll drill. The next one is called Quinlan. It's about 400 meters away. Again, very high-grade showings. We've trenched it. We've got gold in quartz veins, and we'll be drilling that starting in May. Sorry, I'll go back one slide. So the plan is starting mid-May, we'll be doing about 2,000 to 3,000 meters of drilling, and that will be focused on those 2 areas, the Titan and the Quinlan showing, and also some holes in between to see if we can't connect those 2. The next project I'll talk about is our Witten Lake project. This actually is a pretty interesting one. So Rob Carpenter took a map of Ontario and looked for operating mines with open ground within 20 kilometers, and this one came up. It's in a greenstone belt, and what we found is that there's actually historical sampling on surface of, it's low-grade copper nickel. Nonetheless, there's sulfide showings on surface. We then followed up in 2021 with the VTEM survey, and also tried to follow up where those original grab samples were taken, and we were able to replicate those. You can see 0.29 copper, 0.135 nickel. Those are not, jaw-dropping grades, but what's interesting about them is that they're in low-grade sulfides. What we think we have is higher-grade sulfides below surface. In fact, you can see in the center here, this Witten Lake is a depression that coincides with the VTEM anomaly, a 3.5 kilometer anomaly below surface. So to us, it's a clear indication that there's something going on below surface. And, it's not necessarily coincidental. We've got nickel copper on surface. Our expectation is that there'll be higher grades below surface, and this could be a significant discovery if it's 3.5 kilometers long and 50 to 100 meters wide. We'll be drilling this one in the summer. We are still waiting on a final permit, so stay tuned for news on that. These rocks, I'm not a geologist, so I'm not going to dwell too much on these, just to say that these are the nickel copper nodes that we're seeing in the boulders that were grabbed in last year. The final project we'll talk about is Savant Lake. Rob wrote his PhD on this type of deposit. He actually did it on Meliodine, which is owned by Agnico Eagle. What's great about these types of deposits is 2 things. One, they're high grade, generally. So in our case, we've seen it on surface, upwards of 25 grams per ton, 130 grams per ton. And they're also very consistent. These iron formations tend to go for kilometers at a time, and the grades are consistent, and the metallurgy is very simple. Not only that, but the majors love them. They own them. Obviously, Agnico's got 2 or 3 up in northern Canada, and produce hundreds of thousands of ounces at sub $700 per ton, all in sustaining costs. So this to us is a very good target for us. We're fully permitted here. We're going to do a little bit more work starting in May, do some more prospecting, come up with some drill targets, and then drilling this project probably later in the year, probably in around September. You can see some of the targets that we're going to be looked at. 138 grams per ton, never been drilled. Some of these other targets have had some existing showings, 15 grams per ton over 0.4. But we're really going to be following up on these maiden drill programs for areas that have not been touched by a drill bit. And just to wrap up, you can see on the right here, Crestcat is our largest shareholder. They own about 12% of the company. Eric Sprott came in last summer. He put in $2 million at the time was 32 cents, which after the rollback puts it at about 96 cents. And we've got other institutions for about 3.5%. Insiders own a decent percentage, 10% for insiders and 10% for advisors. We trade on the TSX Venture under the ticker PPP, and 54.5 million shares outstanding. And at this point, I'll pass it back over to Taylor for some questions.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, Alex. We'll now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. Reminder to everybody on the line that you can type in your questions at any point. So we have a question here from one viewer. The question is, where does Ethos Gold fit in? I'm not exactly sure what that means, but
sure.
Yeah, maybe just recap what you said at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to try and read through the question. Maybe it has to do with the fact that we have base metals in there within the nickel copper project. So, I think the way to look at it is that we're based on the technical skills of our team, we're pretty much commodity agnostic. Most of the projects are gold focused, and that's kind of as a result of the skill set of our team. But we wouldn't necessarily disregard what we view as significant opportunities. So the nickel copper PGE project in Ontario that we looked at, it's called Witten Lake. That one to me was it didn't fit within the Ethos Gold mandate, if you will. But it was certainly a huge opportunity for us. So, I would say anything that's going to create transformational wealth for our shareholders is something that we'd look at. We certainly wouldn't go too far into commodities such as, we probably wouldn't look at uranium. We probably wouldn't look at, lithium and those types of projects, but we would stick to sort of the golds and silvers and copper nickel projects of the world.
Okay, great. We have another question here. Just wondering what the total meters of drilling are for 2022.
Okay. Yeah, so right now we've budgeted about 2,500 meters at Too Good in Newfoundland. And so there'll be 100-meter holes, so you can just imagine 25 holes. In the Witten Lake project, again, same thing, about 2,000 to 3,000 meters. And again, the same with Savant Lake in that same sort of 2,000 to 3,000 meters.
Okay, great. So, looking at these assets, they're in different jurisdictions, but maybe just give us an overview of kind of the relationship with any local communities or First Nations that are in the nearby area at each project.
Right. Yeah. So in Newfoundland, we don't have First Nations that have any overlapping claims on our property, but we do have obviously the local community. And in New World Island, it's an area that's been heavily beaten down because of COVID. They're heavily reliant on tourism, and they had almost none last year. So they are very welcoming to have other opportunities. They're very welcoming for us. So I would say in Newfoundland, I think that's a very good opportunity for us. In Heaven Lake, we rebranded the project Heaven Lake to Witten Lake, and that's because of communications with the First Nations in around that area. We have a good relationship. We've been very proactive. Michelle Tangay, who's our sort of community relations person, is very on top of things. We're trying to do things to maintain our reputation as a discovery group. And so it's always about making sure that you have good reputation, good communication, and advancing with full understanding of your local partners and communities. Savant Lake, we just got our permit for, so that one we've been working on for quite a long time. And again, it's the same thing. It's just about making sure that everyone's on the same page and understand what the goal is ultimately. Are you going to be drilling? Are you going to be digging a big hole in the ground? And making sure that the communities are on side with the work that you're going to be doing.
Okay, great. So, during the presentation, you outlined the exploration work plan at kind of the 3 core projects. You had a nice press release out the other day on that as well that outlined it. Are you planning to do any other kind of earlier stage work at any of the other assets, or is it really just a full focus on the 3 core projects right now?
Yeah, we'll still continue to advance the other projects. I'd say, Shefferville in Quebec, we've earmarked $1 million on that project in 2022. We did a flow-through financing last year, so we'll continue to advance that project, as well as the other project. We've got, I think, 5 projects in Ontario in total, so the other 3, Campbell, Fuchsite, we'll be advancing those systematically, but these are much smaller programs. So, grassroots exploration, coming up with, whether or not we should be drilling it. So, in the order of magnitude of, $300,000 to $400,000.
Perfect. Okay. And with that, I guess, maybe talk a little bit about your structure in terms of exploration teams. Is it kind of the same team going into all the different assets, or do you have different teams by jurisdiction?
Yeah, we try to keep the teams intact in terms of jurisdiction, and at the upper levels. So the technical advisors like Rob Rostowski or Rob Carpenter or Jody Gibson, they tend to stick to their project. So we have a project lead. For example, in Newfoundland, Jody Gibson is sort of technical advisor for that particular project, and in Shefferville, it's Rob Rostowski has oversight of those projects. So it's always good to have a project champion. Because if you have too many people sort of, half looking at things, you're less likely to get a full picture of what you're looking at. And it always helps to have, the general oversight that Rob Carpenter brings. I think he has some pretty tough questions when it comes to, whether we advance or drop these projects. I think that's the battle that goes on in our meetings that we have on a weekly basis. It is really, technical side, they battle it out. And then on our side, on the capital markets and financing side, we need to figure out how much do we want to allocate in terms of money, because we don't have unlimited sources of capital. We certainly have unlimited uses of money. We could start drilling on all our projects, but that's not necessarily the right thing to do and the right way to advance. So it's a pretty healthy debate that we have.
Okay, great. And just speaking about Rob Carpenter, he took on a bigger role with the company. Maybe just kind of outline kind of what that role entails and his involvement.
Yeah, so originally he came on as technical advisor, and he started to build out the team and then build out the projects. And I think, about November, December of last year, he kind of said, hey, listen, we want to really make this more of a discovery group company, not only bring Rob Carpenter more into the fold of the company, so as co-chairman, but also bring John Robbins and Jim Paterson more involved with the company. So it was really, a big meeting that we had with everybody, and that's where that came out, where we decided, hey, listen, if we're going to do this, let's go full bore. Let's change the name. Let's roll it back. Let's do a financing and position guys like John and Jim and Rob Carpenter.
Okay, great. And then going forward, I know you've got you kind of your plans outlined in you know, a nice portfolio of projects with some optionality in there to pivot if need be. You know, are further kind of projects under consideration? Is that kind of an active aspect of the company, like evaluating other opportunities out there, or is it, do you feel you have a nice portfolio now and you're more just focused on executing at this point?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the answer is that we'd always be looking. So, you know, the portfolio that we have today, we don't know if we're going to keep all those projects, right? Because as you advance them, you may be disappointed with your results. You know, not everything's going to get the opportunity to be drilled. And that's just the nature of our business. That's why there's so much upside, you know, because we're looking at greenfields projects. These things don't necessarily have anything underneath the ground. So, you know, we try to advance them as cost effectively as possible, but it's certainly possible and probably more likely than not that we don't advance them to the drill stage. So what you're seeing is, you know, projects coming into the pipeline and they may drop off, but the ones that we will drill are ones that have passed that test of, you know, very good indications. I mean, Too Good is a great example of this. We've got, you know, very high grade grab samples. That doesn't necessarily mean it's something that you would drill. And then we found quartz veins, you know, outcropping with gold in it. And at this point, we have to drill it. It's kind of a no-brainer. But not every project has that same sort of, you know, success. So I'd say, you know, we constantly get pitched things. I get things in my inbox almost every day. Not everything gets reviewed, but, you know, we try to stick to areas that have good geology, you know, in areas that have operating mines, for example. And then we get our technical team to review it and see if we can't put together district scale opportunities, because we don't want to be looking at small projects or projects, you know, next to, you know, areas that, you know, if we make a discovery, we're really making it on behalf of, you know, someone else. We want to get the whole thing. So.
Okay, perfect. So it looks like we are out of questions at this point. So maybe just if you have any final words for listeners, or maybe just sum up the key catalysts to look out for again, and then we'll sign off. But I'll let you have the last word here.
Sure. Yeah, so our focus this year is on these 3 main drill projects. Our flagship is Too Good. We'll be drilling that in May at high-grade gold in quartz veins on surface, 2,500 meters. That'll start mid-May. Followed by the Witten Lake project, which is nickel copper PGE in Ontario, and finally Savant, which is a high-grade gold project in Ontario. Our core objective is to create transformational shareholder value, and we're going to do that through making a discovery, and I hope you'll come along for the ride.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for taking the time today to host the webinar with Red Cloud Securities, and thank you to everybody on the line for tuning in.
Thank you.